Okay, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 8th General Meeting of Shareholders of Proteomics International Laboratories. It's now sufficiently after 9:30 a.m. and as we have a quorum of shareholders present, I declare the meeting open. The notice convening today's meeting was made available to shareholders on the 19th of October of this year and lodged with ASX on that date. Consequently, with your forbearance, I'll take that notice as being read. First of all, let me introduce you to the members of your board. Some of them will be very familiar to you. Dr. Richard Lipscombe, our Managing Director. We have another Dr. Robin Elliott, so that's a paradox for you. We have Roger Moore, Paul House, Company Secretary, Karen Logan, and we also have Ashley Woodley from BDO, hiding in the crowd there, representing our independent auditor. I'd also like to acknowledge our former chair, Mr. Terry Sweet, who's with us today. Welcome. It's always good to see you, Terry. The financial year 2022 was a very busy period for the company, with many highlights that are set out in the annual report. We have also had a very busy start to 2023, including very exciting progress on our potential test for endometriosis, significant advances in the commercialisation of the ProMarker-D test, including the binding letter of intent with Sonic Healthcare USA, and a highly successful $8 million placement. Richard will speak, as he customarily does, in more detail to the company's achievements in his presentation later this morning. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank Richard in particular and the entire Proteomics team, many of them who are with us today, for their continuing professionalism and dedication. Their hard work has the potential to fundamentally improve millions of lives. I would also like to thank all long-standing shareholders for their continuing support, and I'm pleased to welcome the more recent shareholders to the company. I think we have a very promising future. I will now turn to the formalities of the meeting.
As Neville said, thank you one and all for your support on those resolutions, and welcome to the few people in the room that I haven't met before. Most welcome to our annual general meeting. So I'm going to give an informal presentation of where we're at as a company. Feel free to ask questions as we go, but I'll certainly take questions at the end and look forward to receiving them, Conrad. So 2022 has been a wonderful year for us as a company, and to describe it as an inflection point for us as an organisation is really quite an understatement. And I'm going to take you through the journey that we've had through 2022 and indicate some of the key elements of why we as an organisation and as a board and I as the Managing Director feel it's been such a significant time. Standard disclaimer. So as a company, we are positioned at the forefront of the area known as precision medicine and predictive diagnostics. It's a very exciting field globally, and we genuinely are at the forefront of it in the area that we operate. We're focused on diagnostics. Our lead test, our lead product, ProMarker-D, is a special way of predicting and allowing the early identification of diabetic kidney disease. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that over the next several minutes. From our perspective, what's exciting is it's now in market. It is a cost-effective, patented test. It's easy to use. And it's part of a strong pipeline of tests that we have in development and maturing across a range of chronic diseases, from endometriosis through lung diseases, esophageal cancer, and other forms of complication from diabetes. The bioanalytical services business is a very important part of our business model. I'm not going to talk about that in any more detail above what's on this slide today. But to emphasize what it means to us as a business, it services the specialist demands that we get from the pharmaceutical industry, from other biotechnology companies, through to academia, and allows us to provide some very sophisticated testing services to them. In particular, we have a growing pharmacokinetics business, which is linked to clinical trials. Australia is world renowned for its ability to run early stage clinical trials, and we are able to provide some specialist testing to those facilities and to those trials that are run, and that all occurs here in the Perkins building where our labs are. And for those of you who are new to our premises, you're most welcome to have a tour afterwards. Our state-of-the-art facilities are second to none globally. We continue to invest in new technology and new equipment, and we've invested over $5 million in the last few years in expanding and developing our facility, so it really is cutting edge. But the important part of the business model is that this revenue partially offsets our cash burn from R&D and product development. So when you look at our net cash burn on the right, as an organization of our size, our net burn is only $3.5 million. And that's really something we're very proud of. We don't spend shareholders' money lightly, and we do everything we can to make sure we provide value for money. And yes, we want to grow fast. Yes, we want to expand. But yes, we want to do so in a sensible way. And as a co-founder of the company from our days in 2001, I can safely say that we would not be standing here as an organization if we had just received other people's money in the early days, burnt it, and it would be gone. So it's enabled us with this business model to reinvest money that we make from our clients. We receive the R&D tax rebate, the cash offset from the government. That was a figure of $1.7 million last financial year. So that takes our total revenue and income to nearly $3.5 million as well. So we have a mature business model which has been proven. The other area of our funding, we do appeal to a range of government entities, and we received some manufacturing support for our ProMarker test in May of $0.4 million. And there's always the potential to gain additional grants in those areas. The diagnostics facility money that we refer to, we are part of a broader facility with the University of Western Australia, and we have a level of synergy there and duplication of equipment so that if our equipment goes down, we have access to theirs and vice versa. So again, an important part of our business model that we don't normally discuss in detail, but it enables us to attract additional government funding. And recently, $1.7 million went to the facility across the two sites. We contributed $150,000 to leverage that 1.7 million. So it really emphasizes part of our model, which again, we don't normally talk about in detail, but emphasizes why we're here. And obviously the placement that we did in August that Neville referred to is a fantastic achievement in the current climate. Thank you to those in the room who facilitated that and who supported it. That money is really enabling us to start sprinting in a few areas that we were already running hard in. So those strategies to expand and accelerate growth are well in place. On the corporate side, as any CEO, managing director or board will say, we're undervalued. Our share price has definitely held up well in the current climate. However, given where we're at and what we've achieved, particularly over the last 3 or 4 months, I think there's an enormous upside to our share price, and we'll look at some peer comparisons later to emphasize some of the potential that we have as an organization. The register is still tightly held, 18% with the directors. You've heard a little bit about them in passing through the resolutions today. I'm not going to go into any additional detail other than to say, as an organization, we're very proud of the board that we have, the directors that we've attracted, the level of expertise that we have for an organization of our size is phenomenal. I'm very grateful to the guidance and the candor that we can have in our conversations around where we're going as an organization. And I think it positions us very strongly for an exciting time over the next few years as a company. Our technology platform, we call ProMarker. This is our point of difference that lets us do what we do as a company, lets us create our new products. So the ProMarker platform lets us identify unique protein biomarkers that we can find in the blood. So a fingerprint, if you will, at a molecular level that tells us what's going on in a biological system. We identify these unique biomarkers. They can be specific to the disease, When we identify those markers, that lets us create novel intellectual property, novel diagnostic tests. And our ability to find these consistently is what really underpins us as an organization. And ProMarker-D is the exemplar of what we've done with this technology. We will have a series of other tests in the months and years ahead. ProMarker-D, our lead test, is a simple blood test for predicting diabetic kidney disease. It can predict the future for those patients. It's going to change the lives for those patients around the world who have access to this test. And it's a very exciting time for us to see it start to roll out. Why do we need the test? If you're one of the 537 million people with diabetes worldwide today, there's a very strong likelihood that you will develop chronic kidney disease at some point in the future. 1 in 3 of the people with diabetes in the world today already have developed kidney disease because tests like ours didn't exist when they were at their vulnerable stage. Those people do not have good future, do not have a good future on the horizon, really. Their kidneys will eventually fail. It's a disease which is irreversible. The best outcomes are dialysis and kidney transplant. And that's 1 in 3 people with diabetes. So that's over, we're getting up to 200 million people around the world who are going to end up requiring dialysis in due course because the current standard of care simply is not good enough. So that's the roadblock. There's some existing tests known as the estimated glomerular filtration rate, which is a simple blood test, eGFR, the albumin-creatinine ratio, which is a simple urine test, measures protein in the urine. They both tell you that you've already got kidney disease, which isn't a lot of good if you want to stop it. The tests have been around for 50 years. They're not very accurate. They're not very sensitive. And so the consequence of this is that we have this tsunami of people moving towards dialysis and kidney transplant. And when we got invited to get involved in this project now several years ago, it was with a view to doing better. The clinicians within the diabetes community in Western Australia approached us and said, what could we do with our technology to find a better way of detecting the disease? ProMarker-D, that's now been developed over those several years, is a test that can predict the onset of diabetic kidney disease up to 4 years in advance. So that molecular fingerprint, that appears a long time before those clinical symptoms. And we can detect that fingerprint. And then it's a game changer. Then with the ability to intervene early, you're going to get much better outcomes. The old adage that prevention is better than cure. It's much easier to get therapeutic interventions that are going to be successful if the disease is only mild or very, very early stage. So by doing so, we see the opportunity to save healthcare systems billions of dollars, as well as improve the quality of lives for our patients. ProMarker-D has made some amazing advances over the last couple of years, but particularly over the last several months. It is a test that's starting to roll out in markets around the world now. As I said, it's an enormous market. I'll talk a little bit more to the statistical performance and the accuracy of the test. We're very pleased to be working with Janssen Pharmaceuticals, who are part of Johnson & Johnson. We're invited by them to do a retrospective analysis of one of their completed clinical studies to see if we could predict what was going to happen in that clinical study. And we're able to do that. Again, I'll talk more on that in detail. But the key point around this is that Janssen were the first company to come up with a new treatment for diabetic kidney disease. Obviously, it's no benefit if we can predict who's going to get sick if you can't do something about it. And what we've been able to do is see a range of pharmaceutical companies now developing a class of drugs called SGLT2 inhibitors that are actually a way of treating diabetic kidney disease. So that's why we're working with them. And again, I'll talk more on that. Key points also from this slide. We spent a period re-engineering our test onto a simple technology platform so that the rest of the world can use it. When you look at our facilities upstairs, they are quite sophisticated, to say the least. That allows us to do what we do in our development side. But in terms of being able to roll that out around the world, with hindsight, we're overly optimistic about the skills of some of our potential partners, and we learned the hard way that we were a long way ahead of the rest. So it meant that we had to actually re-engineer our technology onto something a lot simpler so that others could copy what we could already do. Regulatory approvals, we have a number now, CE mark in Europe. In the US, we're following what's called the laboratory developed test path with clear certified labs. We have ISO 13485 certification, which is important for manufacturing. That's internally within our facilities here, but also externally with that manufacturing scale up, and we've transferred to a specialist manufacturer in Europe where we've managed to complete some pilot batches of our kits and the assay itself. On the regulatory side, we will continue to register the test in other jurisdictions around the world, and we have an application pending with the Australian TGA at the moment. What's new on this slide is that we can say we've got first sales initiated. That's happened in Central America over the last couple of months. It is small to start with. I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail shortly, but it's a very important first step in a market which is a gateway into the US as well as South America. Obviously, the partnership with Sonic Healthcare USA is the most exciting development that we've had as a company in arguably in our existence, and we're looking forward to talking more about that. The reimbursement side of things is a key series of milestones that, and targets for us over the next several months, both in the US and in the UK and here in Australia. We've done a number of studies already to look at the economic health benefit of the test, and we've already demonstrated the strength of the test, the money that we're going to save healthcare systems. So we're very confident that our data supports reimbursement in a range of jurisdictions. How do we use the test? It's simple to integrate into the current workflows of any pathology diagnostics laboratory. So it's a standard blood draw. We analyze those biomarkers. We actually measure 3 biomarkers in our test. They're the ones we find in the blood, and then we add in 3 simple clinical factors: how old the patient is, what their existing cholesterol level is, and their current kidney disease function with the EGFR test. So those 6 variables then get uploaded into the cloud. It's a seamless exercise, automatically generates the reports, and that returns back to the laboratory and then on to the treating physician, so that we can then adjust the treatment of the patient so that we can optimize their care. So this is an example of how our reports look at a simplified level. We give a risk score. If you are in the green zone in our test, we can say with 98% accuracy that you're not going to be developing diabetic kidney disease in the next 3 or 4 years. If you're in the red zone in our test, however, you are in trouble, and there's a very high likelihood, in the high 80% chance, that you will develop diabetic kidney disease in the next 4 years. So this test is very powerful at both ends of the spectrum. For the patients who are sick, they've got diabetes, but they don't know they're developing kidney disease. For the doctors who want to treat them, this test is going to identify who's at risk much earlier and let us intervene. For the patients who are hypochondriacs and just think that they need to be on every medicine under the sun, we can identify those patients and say, no, you don't need to be on drugs at this stage. Your diabetes needs to be managed properly, of course, but the expensive medicines that are available to treat some of these complications aren't necessary for those patients. And this is where that economic health benefit modeling matters, because if you look at standard diabetes care, drugs like metformin are $30 a month. The SGLT2 inhibitors range from $200 or $300 to several $100s a month in the US. So clearly putting people on a drug at that price is going to bankrupt healthcare systems just as much as a number of people and thousands of people ending up on dialysis. So it's a balance, and our test enables doctors and treating physicians to achieve that balance for their patients. This is a recurring test, so we do need to monitor people and keep an eye on their progression of their disease. So on average, we expect to test every patient once a year, high risk, more often, low risk, potentially less often. The clinical data behind our test has all been published. This represents several years of work. It's comprehensive and very powerful support for what we're claiming our test can do. We've tested over 5,000 patients in long-term clinical studies. We have very high accuracy, 8 or 9 times out of 10 being able to predict who will go on to develop diabetic kidney disease. The work we did with Janssen that I mentioned in the stage 1 collaboration, that was a very important global clinical study where they provided us samples from around the world that they collected, and they would have spent a couple of $100 million running that trial. They provided those samples to us. We were able to predict which patients in that trial went on to develop kidney disease by the end of the trial. So that was in the placebo arm. The exciting bit for us is the stage 2, which is the drug effect arm. So what we were able to do is identify those patients in the red zone in our test and say, these patients are at risk of developing diabetic kidney disease in the next 4 years. And then see what happened to those patients if they stayed on placebo or if they went on drug. And if they stayed on placebo, they continued to develop diabetic kidney disease. If they went on drug, they had a much lower chance of developing diabetic kidney disease. Their pro-marker D score improved over time. So this is that paradox of these patients, they know they're sick because they've got diabetes, but they're not sick otherwise. They don't have diabetic kidney disease. And we give them a drug and they don't develop diabetic kidney disease. So that's a harder one to get your head around. But the point is that with a data study of this size, if we had not identified those patients, if they had not been on drug, then they would have gone on to develop the disease. So this is the potential game changer. It's a complex message, and we're still in the process of writing up this work with Janssen and the University of Western Australia, but we look forward to presenting that result. And we think that's a very powerful statement for not just Janssen and the canagliflozin drug, but all the drugs in this class. Last but by no means least on this slide is just emphasizing that the existing tests simply can't predict who's going to get sick. So if you use existing standard of care and look at these populations and say what happens next, with the existing test, you'll be right none of the time. Whereas with the pro-marker D test, as I said, we're getting very high levels of predictive power. The market opportunity continues to grow. We've now got a comprehensive patent position. All the patents we've applied for pro-marker D have been granted, with the recent one for Hong Kong. And what you're looking at here is the size of the market opportunity in those countries with the blue bar. So 140 million people in China with type 2 diabetes. The US is obviously a primary target market for us, at 32 million people there with diabetes. Hong Kong is obviously an interesting market. And just touching on that briefly, the reason that we're excited to get that patent, it's clearly a gateway market to China. It's still independent from a regulatory perspective. The ability to run pro-marker D in Hong Kong is something that we're very keen on pursuing as a gateway then to markets like China. Our patent portfolio and our trademarks now cover 72% of the world's diabetics, so that's well over 350 million people. What we're looking at in terms of the business model is a test that's going to be run once a year at that minimum price point of $150. Standard royalty rates 5 to 15%. So if you took a midpoint there and said 10% and did a calculation on that, we'd expect to be receiving $15 US on every test that's sold. That would be what we consider a reasonable floor price based on extensive stakeholder engagement studies that we've done. So in terms of our route to market and where we're going, this is the crux of the business, and this is the exciting time for us as an entity. So I'm going to focus on the route to the US as an exemplar of what we could look like in other global markets. So the diagnostics laboratory will license the test. We provide the kits to them. They pay for them. So they're reimbursing us. They run the test. So the laboratory, the partner does the work. They collect all the blood samples. The laboratory runs the test, uploads the data. The report's generated automatically by our hub and sent back to the laboratory, and we get that royalty in every test that's sold. We've been working with Sonic Healthcare USA for now over a couple of years to get to this point where we have a binding letter of intent in place. And yes, we need to finalize the contract terms within that, which we anticipate doing in the near term. But under that contract, already under that binding letter of intent, we have already been able to make a number of significant steps. So Sonic's reference lab laboratories in the US have now completed the evaluation, completing the setup of the test under that special certification, and the test is now available on their menu of reference tests. It's right up there next to monkeypox, which is not perfect from a marketing perspective. But in terms of novelty and their keenness on bringing in new tests, it really emphasizes where we sit. Out of the several hundred tests that they provide, they have 5 or 6 on their reference menu, and we are one of them. What we will be looking forward to, as I said, is completing the sign-off of that agreement. PLA code reimbursement is obviously key. So PLA, that type of proprietary laboratory analysis coding relates to how we can get reimbursement for the test. We're expecting to know the outcomes of this early next year. That's going to determine that $150 price. More importantly, it's going to determine the speed of uptake of the test. Obviously, if we can get insurance companies in the US to be paying for the test, it's going to be easier to get people to use the test. Otherwise, we go through an out-of-pocket route. On the strength of that partnership with Sonic Healthcare USA, we are looking at a range of markets around the world. Clearly, it's not quite a no-brainer, but it almost is. Once the test is available in the US, it's going to be a lot easier to sell the test in other parts of the world. So our team, both from a business development and technical perspective, have been working with groups across the world to see how we can bring ProMarket to market in other jurisdictions, and we'll provide more updates on those in the near term. But in terms of where we are at in other markets, the UK is obviously a key market for the sole reason of the National Health Service there, and for all the critical comments that can be made about the National Health Service, it is still a fantastic opportunity for the patients and people within that jurisdiction to get healthcare in a very affordable way. So the NHS evaluate the test, they then decide whether it's going to be reimbursed, and they also run the test. So we are in those conversations with the NHS through their body called NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. So they have an ongoing assessment process, and we will get some evaluation provided by them over the next few months, where they tell us what path we are on and towards being adopted as a test in the UK. There is no guarantee that they will say that they will adopt us, but the fact that they are talking with us is a positive sign, and we'll provide more information on that as it becomes available. We're working with a group there called Apicor, who are well connected and a very good fit for us as an organization. So that is a particularly exciting market, I think. It's going to go, it may be slow adoption because it will be sort of nothing, but then once it's on the NHS menu, then clearly we've got a very strong market opportunity. Central America is an interesting one, which we've mentioned a few times over the years and included in our annual report. Our partners, Proteomics Global Solutions, are based in Dominican Republic, and they have laboratories in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. We've been working with our colleagues there for 4 or 5 years. They have a license to run ProMarket. They've actually developed their own immunoassay to show that it's quite simple to do. And they went live in Puerto Rico in September, in Dominican a few months before. The volumes are not large, but it's very key from our perspective. It shows the seamlessness of our process. So they simply upload the results. The reports are all generated. This is all in Spanish. Just goes back to their facilities. At the moment, they're doing a simple batch process, just once a month, small numbers of samples. But it shows how easy it is to run the ProMarket test. And even for a place where you think, well, Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, how many people live there? I must say I had to check or double check the size of the market opportunity. There's 1.3 million people with type 2 diabetes across those two islands. So that's the same number as in Australia. Their population is actually across the two islands, it's about 3.5 in Puerto Rico and 11 in Dominican Republic. So these are substantial markets, and the potential for this to be a gateway into other parts of Central America and South America is there. I would emphasize we've been working with a group in this part of the world for a long time, because Puerto Rico is a very good manufacturing site, and the original work on the development of the ProMarket E assay was done in Puerto Rico. So it's not just a why are we there type exercise, it's a very strategic business, and a number of entities globally have their manufacturing hubs in Puerto Rico. Other markets, opportunities, places like Israel, we see that as quite a dynamic market and a good place to explore. And that had been on hold for a number of prerequisite hurdles that we had to climb over. One was in terms of manufacturing to a certain grade that was achieved once we commenced manufacturing in Europe with 13485. And now with sales starting globally, that removes the other barrier. Israel will not be first when it comes to selling a test. They might like to be first in a few other things, but in terms of selling a test, they're happy to, they prefer to be second. So with sales now, that opens the door for a market like that. And you can see the potential for dominoes to drop across markets around the world. The Middle East, on average, I doubt if you're all big fans of football, but watching the World Cup in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, the rates of diabetes in those countries are over 20%. So there's plenty of people there with, and what we have seen from watching the football is they've got very deep pockets and they're happy to build very expensive stadiums. They've also built very expensive hospitals. So these are markets that we will be pursuing actively on the back of launching in the US. The pipeline that we have is rich. And as I said, this is one of our key points of difference, why Proteomics International Laboratories Limited is a different entity from any other company on the ASX. We have an ability to generate new diagnostic tests because we have a very smart group of people sitting in this room who understand this technology. We have a world-class facility upstairs. And in Australia, we have access to some fantastic clinical samples which are not readily available in the rest of the world. And in Western Australia in particular, we have some fantastic long-term clinical studies and biobanks that we can access by being here. So that underpins why we're here. What do we work on? That's determined by our assessments of what designates a significant unmet need. We look for a disease which is chronic, meaning it affects large numbers of people, and a condition where the existing tests simply aren't good enough. So we have a number of tests following in the footsteps of ProMarket E. Endometriosis and esophageal cancer are most closely behind, and I'll talk to those a little bit more in a second. We have a number of other tests that I mentioned earlier in terms of lung disease, some exciting early data in that. We'll look forward to talking more about diabetic retinopathy in due course. Stepping out of the human area into agriculture, plant dieback is something that we're excited about as well. And at the appropriate time, we'll share more information on the potential for developing improved testing so that we can work out which areas of, particularly in Western Australia, the southwest might be affected by plant dieback, but that's got enormous application in stone fruit industry from avocado through a range of other areas around the country and potentially internationally. So it all comes back to finding that molecular fingerprint, which we're good at doing. The oxidative stress area is a slightly different technology. It's actually, by our standards, we would say that's more sophisticated than what we already do. So it's getting out there in terms of complex technology. We spun it out into another company and we've announced that. We look forward to seeing how that will develop. And that's got very broad applications across a range of areas from chronic health and muscle wasting through to high performance athletes and in sport through to horse racing. So that's a business opportunity that we look forward to sharing more on as well. But I'm going to focus now on a couple of diseases which we think ProMarket E is going to change the world. ProMarket endometriosis could go to a whole nother level in terms of its potential to reach more people. It's a painful condition where the tissue grows outside of the uterus into other organs. It takes on average 7.5 years to diagnose, and it affects 1 in 9 women. The cost is significant in Australia alone. The results that we presented in fertility conference in July indicated that we had a good early stage test for being able to identify endometriosis. We've been working with the Royal Women's Hospital and the University of Melbourne. It's now a relatively large clinical study, approaching 900 samples. It is a potential world-first blood test for endometriosis. We do need to do more work to validate and complete this work, but it's a fantastic starting point. Esophageal cancer, same concept. Can we do a better biomarker than and come up with a better test than is currently available? Esophageal cancer, they test by taking a biopsy by sticking a tube down your throat. Endometriosis, they test by doing a biopsy by sticking a camera into the abdomen and taking an incision. Clearly, both of those paths are not appealing to the patient. Esophageal cancer is the balancing of the gender ledger for us, because obviously endometriosis affects women. Esophageal cancer tends to affect men. Unfortunately, men tend to eat less well, shall we say, and so more suspect to acid reflux. Acid reflux leads to burning of the esophagus. That can lead to a pre-malignant condition called Barrett's esophagus, can lead to esophageal cancer. And if you're at that point, then 5-year survival rate less than 20%. Again, with working with some of the world experts in this, and particularly a group out of the QMI Berkhofer Medical Research Institute, but also with samples out of the US, we've been able to develop a prototype test where we were identifying 9 out of 10 people with the cancer. So again, potential first world first blood test for this area as well. So we look forward to providing more results as we round out the tests and we take them down the same path as ProMarker D with that traffic light system to look for the red zone and the green zone and work out which way we can best characterize those patients and where the boundary is in these complex diseases. For endometriosis, where does it actually start as a condition? For esophageal cancer, where does the cancer actually start as a condition? That's part of our challenge. So in terms of milestones and what we've achieved this year, as I started this presentation, it's been a phenomenal year for us as an organization. And I'm not going to go through everything in the green boxes, but these are all things we said we were going to do at the start of the year. And we've done them. The blue boxes are things that we're saying that we are intending to do next year, and can't guarantee that we'll do them, but we expect to. So the key things that we've achieved in 2022 relate to bringing through those new tests for esophageal cancer and endometriosis and identifying new biomarkers, all as part of the platform. Most importantly, taking ProMarker D to the next level in terms of that partnership with Sonic Healthcare USA as a driver for rolling the test out into markets around the world. Very strong clinical data to support that, a strong patent position to support that. Next year will be around what we can do with Sonic Healthcare USA for the rollout. For that reimbursement in the US, the PLA code is clearly key and an important stepping stone to generating substantial potential revenue out of the US. Speed of uptake, time of uptake are all things that we are not in a position to talk about at this stage. Ultimately, this is a test that could benefit 32,000 people in the US with diabetes, but currently we're testing nobody. So somewhere between those two numbers is our revenue and uptake forecast for the future years. I'll just finish with a few value inflection points for us as an organization, emphasizing where we're going. So that obviously further deals, as I touched on, for markets around the world, that's all going to ride off the interest that's already been generated by us working with Sonic Healthcare USA. So that's going to drive global uptake and future revenue. We've said we've got first sales in Central America. We look forward to talking more about revenue in the US in coming quarters. Reimbursement in the US I've already touched on, and further regulatory approvals I mentioned, along with our tests coming through. The key point from this slide really is the box on the left. In terms of looking at us as an exceptional global opportunity, we have a disruptive cutting-edge technology, and it's proven, and it's in-house, and it's going to lead to many more products. So ProMarket E is the first. There will be others. It's a test that's been de-risked, patented, and is revenue ready, and it's very scalable, with potential very high margins off a low-cost format. So it's got a whole of market appeal from the testing laboratories through to the drug companies, and everywhere in between, from the patients to the physicians. So we think it's perfectly positioned for adoption, and we're taking a similar position for our pipeline of tests, where we've tried to position those for broad use. It is a very vibrant sector. Precision medicine broadly, diagnostics in the back of now a global awareness of the importance of testing, particularly for one or two diseases which you're well aware of. The opportunities here in this space are clearly enormous, and the CSL acquisition of Vifor is a very interesting one from our perspective. I'm not going to put Robin on the spot to explore that one more, but clearly that level of activity, meaning a $15 billion acquisition for a company which is interested in primarily drugs in the diabetic kidney disease space, and broadly kidney disease, that speaks to a lot about the size of the market opportunity. And we are part of that environment, and we look forward to exploring how we can fit more into it in the time ahead. I'm going to leave you with peer comparison of a few other companies out there and why we are a company with massive opportunity ahead of us and where we see ourselves going. Obviously, the Australian market's been very tough of late, and our share price has held up. There's a couple of other companies in Australia to look at, Innovic, early stage IP, but using a similar concept to ours in terms of finding biomarkers. Lucid Diagnostics, a US-based company with an early stage test for esophageal cancer. That's the DNA test, but they're spending a lot of money trying to get that test going. So we look forward to competing in that space with our esophageal cancer test. Renalytix have a very complex test for diabetic kidney disease. Very expensive test at $950. They've been doing it tough in terms of rolling that test out. I think they're running their own facilities, and they don't have a high-end partner like us. We look forward to running past them in the coming months. But it does show that there's interest in the test, and they've got reimbursement code. They've got the veterinary body in the US endorse their tests, and so they're all areas that we will follow with ProMarket E. Rither Biosciences is a nice success story on the Australian front. Early stage test for colon cancer, very competitive market. Not their technology, they've licensed that from CSRO. They have a healthy market cap. I think that's an indication of where we'll be heading. Lot of potential. The Telix story we put up there by way of an exemplar for what can be done in this space. Telix, a very broad portfolio of products in development, but ultimately they're a diagnostics company at the moment, and they've just started getting revenue for very innovative products. Just received FDA approval, flying off the shelves in the US, and nice to see their share price flying upwards at the same rate. So we look forward to trying to emulate stories like that one. Thank you very much for your attention, and happy to take questions.